Okay, great. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the Lady Liberty League. Today is Friday, August 8th, and we are happy to have a special meeting to welcome to the Lady Liberty League, um, Patty Kane, registered nurse. I am Sue Richko, and I am sitting with a woman who embodies courage and action. Patty Kane is a psychiatric nurse at Metro Health Cleveland Heights. She is leading the charge to unionize approximately 70 nurses under the Ohio Nursing Association, which is affiliated with the American Federation of Teachers. Patty and her colleagues have been facing serious challenges on the job. They're caring for patients in crisis with too few resources and too little support. Some nurses have even endured physical injuries, including traumatic brain injuries and broken bones. They have been overworked, disrespected, and treated like children with pizza parties and contests instead of much needed structural support. Patty has sacrificed a great deal to stand up. A lawsuit filed against her before this organizing effort cost her a significant portion of her personal savings and her peace of mind. It was later proven false, but it served as one more piece of evidence that protection through unions was not only necessary, but urgent. Today, she is going to join me in the absence of my co-founders in a special meeting to speak about the fight for safety, dignity, and autonomy in the workplace. This conversation is about far more than one hospital. It's about justice in healthcare and the power of one voice to lead many. So I would like to welcome you, Patty, and I want to begin with, a building question and starting from the beginning. I would like to dig into your story and what brought you to nursing, and more specifically, what drew you to the specialty of psychiatric nursing? And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Um, what drew me to nursing was I have earned a bachelor's of science in biomedical photography, and I worked as a medical photographer, and it didn't pay the bills, and I needed to leave. I needed to be on my own. I needed to be able to take care of myself, and I didn't know what else to do. My sister was a nurse, and so I went back to school and became one. I really didn't have any lofty goals or anything poetic beyond that. Um, but while I was working, I have to say, when I was working as a medical photographer in a ophthalmology clinic, there were a lot of people who came in, and I realized how fragile they were, how they really didn't have any advocacy. If they had family show up with them, it was helpful, but a lot of times they didn't really understand what was going on either. And the physicians were nice, but I think a lot of them didn't understand how to speak to people who had different background from them, or maybe had a different educational sort of background from them. And that I was drawn to. Um, and I came to pediatric psychiatry just by, it was purely by chance. For the first couple of years of nursing, I tried different fields and I hated them. And I thought like psychiatry was like my last, like, all right, let's just give this one last chance. And I was talking to a woman, I put in my resume, I was speaking, had a job interview. This woman was great. She seemed really all about it. She said things that were kind of inspiring, and I realized they were important points about taking care of people. And then halfway through, she said, "Why do you want to take care of kids?" And I realized that there were two job openings at this small hospital at Windsor Laurelwood. Um, and one job was open for an adult and the other one was open for peds. And I think what happened was HR might have given a resume to the wrong department. I think I think there was a mix-up, but I was so desperate to get a job that was completely different from what I'd done that, I grew up with foster kids in my home. I had some exposure um, to kids, and so I just kind of said something, you know, I don't know. I tried to patch together something that she might like to hear, and then I got the job, and I realized that this is what I love. That it's everything I didn't realize but needed as in a profession. So I stayed at Windsor Laurelwood for a minute, but I knew that Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland was opening a psychiatric unit, and it was going to be small. And I knew Rainbow was very good with protocols and policies and resources. And if it was in the same building, we would be physically connected to all sorts of resources that were difficult to get in a standalone psychiatric facility. So I went there. I was one of the first two people to be hired, and, oh, it was amazing. It was wonderful for, like, 10
Isn't it
years. It was great.
Isn't it isn't it interesting how the universe brings us exactly where we need to be, kind of
Mhm,
right place at the right time? And as I shared with you, and I think most people know, I'm a nurse as well, and I understand that balance between finding a meaningful career path and something that pays the bills so we can sustain our own lives and to
mhm.
thrive and support our families. So I understand that wholeheartedly. And being in the family, your sister being a nurse too, that makes perfect sense. Could you describe a typical shift at Metro Health in Cleveland Heights, and what does your day-to-day look like?
Typical day, we are 7 to 7, 7A to 7P, the majority of us. We sort of walk in bleary-eyed, everybody walks out bleary-eyed. But, yeah, it's, 7 a.m., 7:30 you start, and it's straight to talking to people, getting meds, trying to keep up with the doctor's orders. And then throughout the day, there's always checking back with people, checking in, having conversations, just trying to foster a conversation or a relationship with that person. Like, what are they there for? And my favorite question is, I can read the chart, which is true. I can read the chart and I can know why you're here per the chart, but I'd much rather hear it from you. And since I sort of blurted that out and didn't even realize that, I wasn't trying to come up with a hook or anything, but now that's my day, is trying to put together maybe anywhere from 4 to 6, at the most 7 people, and try to have a conversation about, no big deal, what's going on with your life. Like, I'm a
Mhm.
perfect stranger. I am trying to interject whatever it is I have to bring into this incredibly vulnerable moment. So that's the toughest part of the day. It's the most rewarding and certainly at times the most hopeful. But yeah, that's definitely the most important part to me.
And for those who don't work in medical, to really emphasize a 12-hour shift and the majority of that being on your feet and definitely attending to the needs of 4 to 7 patients in a very difficult and challenging unit, not just for meds, but doctor's orders, follow-up, communication, connecting. It takes a lot from an individual, not just professionally, but you're giving a lot of yourself emotionally and spiritually, which really emphasizes the need for a resourceful hospital system and a hospital system that acknowledges your needs for safety, for resource, for fair staffing ratios, for protection, especially when you are dealing with folks who are having psychiatric issues. So I want to ask, at what point did it start to feel like things were no longer sustainable? And what signs to you showed you that the system there at Metro Health was breaking down?
Well, things were breaking down when I worked at Laurelwood just prior to um, just prior to coming to Metro. Um, you know, it has to be said that, in that 12-hour period, well, not only if we have successful conversations, you tell me why you're here. Um, at the same time, people can be getting very aggressive.
Mhm.
So there's also a lot of emotional energy that's put into de-escalating, or even if it's not physically aggressive, it's just someone in a intense emotional state. Um, actually, and that ties into when I knew something was broken. Um, there were a couple days at the with kids. I just remember I'd stayed late, and I just remember looking down the patients' rooms were just straight down a hall, and it was a bad day. I'd had my assignment was at Laurelwood. The assignments were much higher. Um, so I had 15 kids that day, um, and everyone was finally in bed, and I just remember looking down the hallway, thinking that this is never ending, and uh, night shift who comes in is going to be one nurse, and they're going to have 15. The worst was 18 patients that I had at that time. I was taking care of kids who were 12 and under. And I knew I hadn't had really meaningful conversations with any of them because there were just too many.
Mhm.
And I knew that it was never ending, and I knew that it was getting worse. This was as we were emerging from COVID, and it was just the circumstances. I just I felt heartbroken. I really
Mhm.
felt just this deep pain that I hadn't really done anything. I'd given kids medicine. I'd made sure that they didn't hurt each other. And these were babies in with very, they're very vulnerable and traumatic
Mhm.
circumstances. Kids come in for a very different reason from adults. And uh, I hadn't done a thing that day. I mean, they got their medicine. So, I mean, of course that's important, but
Mhm.
what did I do beyond that?
So looking down that hall and having that overwhelming sensation of it's never ending and that pain of heartbreak, knowing that you provided the essentials, safety, treatment, medications, but that connection piece, that inventory of their journey and their story that you've referenced more than once, and that piece that matters in humanity. That was missing because you had 15 people to provide all that care for. So I can certainly understand. I mean, and when you mention that these are vulnerable children who have been through a lot and some of the resulting aggression and emotional energy that's spent from them, from yourself, from your coworkers, and de-escalating or being able to provide the appropriate interventions, that is all a lot, and it takes a lot of resource. I know that you had said that some of, well, not just some, you and the other nurses on your unit go through this on a daily. And, in the course of doing your job, some of them have suffered through some serious injuries. And like I referenced in the intro, some of them even being traumatic brain injuries and broken bones. And leadership has often responded with things like pizza parties and donut parties, and you've been asked to participate in contests like decorating your director's office door or building gingerbread houses. How do your colleagues experience, um, how do your colleagues and you interpret that? How does that make you feel? And what's the result when you're dealing with very serious issues with what you say is little support and resource, but then you're asked to participate in a party or a contest like you're a child.
Yeah. Um, we there's it only fosters resentment. If a manager takes out of their own money, out of their own back pocket and buys people pizza, like, hey, lunch is on me. I know this is a really rough day. It's extremely rare for that, but I do appreciate that. But it's usually the hospital coming back and, for Nurses Week or Nurse Appreciation Day. It's infantilizing. And it's
Mhm.
also, I think it's really deeply gendered. I've asked a couple male colleagues, like, how do you feel about this? Like, they gave us cardboard gingerbread houses and called it Christmas in July, Nurse Appreciation. And you know, the male colleague who I was speaking to, he was disgusted.
Mhm.
As he wasn't, and he was quick to say, I'm not putting women down, but and I'm not suggesting anything like that, but it was absurd.
Mm.
We're not in the third grade. I think, no, my son decorated gingerbread houses in the second grade at Christmas time.
Yes.
That's what we did then. It's not appropriate now. It's you're making the assumption that because I'm female that's somehow going to appeal to me. A lot of it is just it's really well, it's infantilizing, and it's sexist, and it really, what it adds up to is it makes it extremely clear what management thinks of us. They think that I guess what they think, we're just little dummies that are going to think that it's sweet and cute. Um, they're going to think that they think that that's how much we're worth.
I could recognize how profoundly insulting that is. It's not unlike if you are in the restaurant industry and you're serving tables and someone leaves you a really subpar tip. It's typically to leave a message that we acknowledge that you're doing this work, but we're only going to give you the crumbs
Yeah,
as as a thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
So you shared a story with me when we had met, what was it, last week or the week before for
Mhm.
coffee? And it really stood out. And you had shared that a young child had been assigned to a room with a teenager. And you and the other nurses made a decision to keep that child at the nurses' station instead of rooming with a teenager when they were both vulnerable. Could you talk about what went into that decision and what some of the ramifications may have been from making that decision?
Yeah, it was well into, at that point, we were on a union campaign at Laurelwood. And I don't know if they were doing it to teach us a lesson. I don't know if it was just business as usual, but there was an 8-year-old who had been recently sexually traumatized. And there was a teenager who, and of course, this person deserves care and treatment, but had a documented known history of perpetration, and who was, I think, 17 and bigger than me. And the administration, we were packed. The beds were packed. The little boy was already there, and they wanted to admit him to the unit. And I said, of course, where's he going to stay? There's nowhere for this person to stay safely.
Mhm.
And they wanted to pack him in that room. They wanted him to room with this little boy. And it wasn't safe. It wasn't ethical. It was, um, I mean, it's difficult to describe how wrong this decision was. And it was, I mean, above all else, it made it very clear that their administration saw patients, they were just tally marks on a spreadsheet. They
Mhm.
weren't people who were actually there to get care. They were people to bill. So
Census volume.
yeah, census volume. And
Mhm.
so we made the decision. Well, actually, I was by myself that day, so I made the decision to pull his mattress out and put it at the nurse's station. He still needed a lot of emotional support, considering what he'd recently been through. He needed to feel safe. So we put him up at the nurse's station, and I was admonished for doing that. And we were told that that it was wrong, and somehow we hadn't followed the rules, even though the rules were clearly set up to hurt this little boy.
That moment, it speaks volumes about the moral weight that you and the other nurses carry, that in doing the right thing and facilitating such a basic human need, such as safety for an 8-year-old child, resulted in you being admonished.
Mhm.
So before you began organizing, you had shared that you faced a lawsuit, and in the lawsuit, it accused you of harming a patient, and that lawsuit was later proven false. But it had a real impact on your life and on your personal savings. How did that experience shape your understanding of the vulnerability of our profession and the need for union protection?
So this was before I'd worked at Laurelwood. Um, I was working at Rainbow and Babies and Children's Hospital. And there was a boss who I really didn't get along with. I didn't get along with her at all. We had really different attitudes towards the way children needed to be cared for. And one day, she and another worker there put together a report that I had assaulted a patient. And it wasn't just a lawsuit. They reported me to the board of nursing. This is a charge with the board. And um, it's a charge that I had committed a crime, is what I was accused of. And in the worst way, it was a crime against a child, which was what I had worked my entire career against. And so, of course, it wasn't true. So, of course, I had got an attorney, and it lasted 3 years. There was assistant attorney generals are the people who process these and possibly
Mhm.
prosecute them in front of with the board. So we got this AAG who was she was really zealous. She was really weird. She had a big problem with she got her hooks into it, and she didn't want to give in. So it took 3 years. And I was really, really fortunate. I got a wonderful attorney, but wonderful attorneys come at a big price.
Mhm.
And it required me to drain most of my retirement. So I don't really have a retirement at this point. My husband took money out of his a Roth IRA. I borrowed money from my parents. Um, it went through COVID. And it resulted in the ultimate, like it peaked with a 3-day deposition in Columbus, me sitting in front of a hearing officer and this assistant attorney general. And at the end of it, the only thing that they found, the hearing officer said that they could substantiate, was that I had put myself in harm's way. I could have gotten hurt to take care of this child. Um, And so, of course, the attorney general, this AAG rather, appealed it because she was angry she hadn't won. So that it went back in front of the entire nursing board, like there are 13 members. And my
Mhm.
attorney again stood in front of all of them. And again, the board found that I had risked harm to myself to keep kiddo safe. And so for 3 years, this AAG was saying, I'm going to take your job, or I'm going to take your license. She said that to me on the phone. She said it to Bill, my attorney. Um, she was hell bent on taking me down. And that was a long time to have. Maybe I won't have a license hanging over my head.
That is so much to go through. Not only the travel time to Columbus, sitting in front of the 13 members on the board of nursing, dealing with it very overzealous assistant attorney general, and using your entire retirement savings and borrowing from your parents. I can't even imagine, and I recognize what a huge hardship that must have been on you, all to find out that you did no harm. As a matter of fact, you were put in harm's way due to the under-resourcing again of nurses in the industry, which is all the more reason that I'm grateful that you are leading the charge on these efforts for the rest of us. When did the conversation about unionizing among the nurses start? And was there a catalyst that made you realize that, hey, now it's time?
Uh, so I was working at Laurelwood, and all of these things were, this was when the case with the board was ongoing, and we were. This was at the beginning of COVID, so we would had already started running out of PPE, and I just looked around and I thought this is completely broken. So between the board, my attorney early on had said, this wouldn't have happened if you had a union. And he wasn't a big pro-union guy. He wasn't he had no he wasn't a labor lawyer, but he just sort of blurted it out offhand. So
Mhm.
when I was working at Laurelwood, I thought, what are they going to take from me? At that point, I was exhausted early on, and I felt like I was just despairing, and thought the only way I'm going to really get myself out of this, and in through through COVID and everything, is I need to do something purposeful. So
Mhm.
I just started talking to nurses and saying, what would that be like for you? Just trying to scope out if someone already knew, or what was their experience, and was their perception. Um, so it took a while asking sort of that question, how would this benefit your life? And they grabbed on. And the nurses at that facility really dug into it, because everyone was so, I mean, the census at nighttime, sometimes the census could be one nurse to 25 patients. I mean, this is not a nursing home. These are people
Mhm.
who are actively detoxing, aggressive, really psychotic. And so everyone was pretty over it. It wasn't too hard to get people to sign cards. And at that point, well, it was the hospital outspent us. They hired, I think it was 20 new people, do techs, and the NLRB ruled we had to include the techs. So the final count, the ballots were color coded. The nurses were blue and the techs were orange. And the yes pile it was almost all blue. And the no pile was orange, but because the hospital had hired a bunch more people, we lost. So at that point, I quit on the spot at the count, and we walked out. And I said to my organizer said to me, like, "What are you going to do now? You just quit." I said, "I'm going to find another hospital to unionize." So we moved on to Metro, and they were also just over it. They were they were over it with the acuity. They were over it with people getting hurt. They had a lot of nurses from St. Vincent's, which was wonderful, and they had the ONA there. And again, we know that everything's broken. I don't have to convince anyone that something has to be done. So again, that wasn't very hard to get people to sign up. I mean, it was. There's a lot of fear, and we had to overcome a lot of fear. People fearful of being terminated, but understanding the reason why is not very difficult for most of us.
I could recognize some of the frustration with a dirty trick like hiring 20 new techs to stack the vote against you and your efforts. And I can certainly understand you wanting to transition to a different area to continue the organizing efforts. Um, Beyond that, what has the organizing process looked like so far, and what kind of other reactions or resistance have you encountered from other nurses, like either for you in your efforts or against you? What are some of the things that you have come across now at Metro Health amongst your team?
Um, for most of us, it wasn't hard. Most people were really on board. But the thing that really the most difficult thing to overcome in the organizing process is being fearful. We have some people who, they have those old beliefs like being in a union is for, one of them said, being in a union is for coal miners. Yes, them too. Um, but mostly it's people are scared. And a lot of people are just worn down. It's the way things are. It's always been this way, even though it isn't. I've been a nurse for 22 years. It has not always been this way. Um, but it was primarily people being scared. I mean, people would ask me, "Aren't you frightened? What are you doing? What could happen?" I said,
Mhm.
"Well, even if they fire me, what are they going to do? Like report me to the board? I've already dealt with that." Like I
Right.
already know how to do that. I think it might have been the experience of having to deal with the board that I think if you don't have that, your gauge, your threshold for fear is very different.
Your superpower, I could definitely recognize is that they don't have anything they can take from you. They've run you through the ringer time and time again. They've stripped you of your dignity, your safety, your
Mhm.
harmony, your peace of mind, your finances, and they've put you in front of every entity. And here you are still fighting. It really must give them pause and give them concern, which leads me into the next question, which is what has it meant to you personally to step forward and to help lead this effort? You as a person, what has this meant to you?
Uh, the most important lesson in all of this, the thing that really shaped it, and it was also something that was very persuasive with some people, was the gap between what it meant to me is understanding the gap between what I intellectually know and then the lived experience.
Mhm.
Intellectually, I know innocent people are convicted of crimes. When I became the innocent person who they were trying to convict of, they were trying to say I had done something terribly wrong. That was a whole different level. For me, the what it meant to me too was understanding money and power. I knew that very powerful individuals and organizations can do all sorts of horrible, horrible things, and they sometimes they can make the truth not matter. And then the lived experience is I don't matter. I mean, I do, but you know what I mean. To them, like I realized how little my life matters. They did all of those things. The board came back, said no. It was in the finding of facts. Actually, the hearing officer. It is a legal fact in the state of Ohio that I put myself in harm's way. Doesn't matter. They don't care, and none of that's going to be restored. Um, so it was for me the most important message was that. Well, and then also, I when I received the findings of fact in the mail, I read them and I was exonerated. I realized like I should be happy but I felt so empty. And I remember staring at a wall and I thought, the only reason I got out of this is because, I was able to purchase the time of an attorney who could basically purchase the recognition that truth exists. And despite being financially drained, I had finances to drain. I'm sitting on an embarrassment of riches. Okay, retirement's kind of, we'll see if that ever happens. But I had a husband who had a Roth IRA to drain. I had parents who were willing to stand by me, and other people don't have that. Other people don't have any of those things. And at the end, even truly the most important lesson for me was, um, I won because, not because of the truth necessarily. I mean, it was because of the truth, but I won because I had the privilege to be able to win.
Mhm.
And sharing that with some of my coworkers was a really big deal. And that was what motivated me so much, explaining to them, this happened to me. I don't want this to happen to you. I work
Mhm.
with plenty of single moms, people who are sort of paycheck to paycheck. I think with that story, I think a lot of them recognized, yeah, that could be me. I
Mhm.
our manager was at the edge of, she just retired. She was great, but if you think your manager has your back, I think 99% of the time you're a fool. They're not going to lose their job for yours. Um, the most important takeaway is that the only way I could find a way to heal from this would be to set up some sort of system that would protect the people around me. And then I would know that it would be less likely to happen to them.
So, Patty, I have to express that that's so powerful to me listening to you that after being exonerated, and you were staring at that wall and you didn't understand why you continued to feel empty inside, it probably was the catalyst that led you to your higher purpose of empowering others with you, who, whether they have those resources that you had and those family members or not, that they would get a sense of that shared empowerment and the unification of coming together.
Mm.
That is
Yeah.
amazing.
Well,
So,
the first thing I realized when all this was kind of this epiphany, was I thought, I'm staring at a wall, but I own that wall.
mhm,
There's so many of
mhm.
my peers, like, they don't own a wall.
No,
No, and
no,
it seems silly, but it's just that was,
no,
yeah, that was really, that was something.
not silly at all, extremely powerful and giving. And it speaks volumes to one of my inner purposes of just really being an advocate for humanity. So thank you for that. I want to go back to your superpower for a minute. And when we were at a recent coffee meeting, you said something and it just stuck with me. It stayed with me, and I've used it since then in other conversations and other capacities. But you said truly, when it comes down to it, the forming of a union isn't necessarily a threat because of the money. Companies fear employee autonomy.
Mhm.
Companies fear employees having a voice, and companies fear that empowerment that you're striving to help others find. That's the most dangerous thing. That's what you had said to me. Would you like to comment on that or elaborate on that?
Um, yeah, and again, I think, I have to pull back to the idea that nursing is a pink collar job. It was a tremendous threat for women to vote. It's a tremendous threat for women to have any say at all. I know this is across um, all professions, for no matter who the worker is. But I feel like in nursing in particular, the idea that that we have the ability to say something and impact something disrupts their perception of their power. And when that power they believe is gone, um, I mean, that's a panic. Like that's a panic situation for them. They think that it's gonna bleed them dry. Um, it's not. Um, they're gonna have better staff retention. They're gonna have better staffing. They're gonna have better care. Um, but that's not what matters. What matters is, I believe, they believe that that we can do something about it.
If they allow you the autonomy of thought, intellect, action, practice, their fear may be if it begins with something small, where does it end? And how do they maintain that control or that leverage over their teams if that's erased?
Hmm. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. So, you talk about the power for nurses and you liken it to a larger collective issue. You do talk about women and women in general. And I think you had used the word, gendered when it came to some of those insignificant pizza parties and contests. Um, and empowering the nurses and larger empowering women, how does that help you better connect to the care that you provide to your patients? What would that daily impact in that assignment feel like in a more positive sense if you had that power as a nurse and as a woman, that power of autonomy and that power of voice?
Um, a common theme that I hear amongst what nurses say is there's a bitterness and a sense of hopelessness. And I don't you can't oh, there's an old expression. I'm gonna mess it up. But basically you can't give people something to drink if your own cup's empty.
Hmm.
So you can't expect people to be able to be caring and patient and willing to put themselves physically in danger if they're despairing. I mean, how are we supposed to do this job for very long? We've seen the repercussions. Nurses have left, and I
Hmm.
understand why. Um, and I think they're just going to keep seeing. We're just going to keep leaving and leaving because it just turns into a survival situation. What are you willing to give up of your personal life?
Fast fact, in just being in healthcare myself, it's something that I was made aware of many years ago and it has stuck with me that every hour, two nurses are attacked. I mean, in a variety of ways. So think about the time that we just spent. Two of our colleagues have been attacked in some kind of way, physically, um, sexually, otherwise, um, and very little is being done. Certainly, from very little is being done from the corporations and the hospital systems, but very little is being done in terms of even just us for ourselves or amongst ourselves. Or pulling together. We do find ourselves in a very precarious, helpless situation. I mean, if you're attacked at work, you're taught to go into a tornado drill position and wait for security to come.
Hmm.
We don't have the right to defend ourselves in any other kind of a way. I don't believe that many people in the general public understand what that means.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people are necessarily entirely aware that, what it says to me is that it's violence against women is okay.
Mhm.
It's okay with them. They're okay if you get hit. there's not going to be a lot of there's not going to be any fallout for it. And we know that we even say that behind the nurses station, like violence is okay. And and a lot of us also say, violence against women is okay. How many women do we know in our lives who have been the victim of some form of violence, any form of violence? It's probably the majority of us. If there's a bunch of women in a room, you had to make a guess. It's definitely more than 50%. So we're just echoing that sentiment that keep going.
And to clarify, and I don't have the stat in front of me right now, but out of those 4 million nurses nationwide, the largest proportion of them are female. So I think it's like upwards of 80%. So although men are coming into the nursing field, it is still predominantly a woman's industry, which leads into what you're saying. Now, if this were a male-dominated industry, would the resource look and feel differently? If it were males being attacked, would there be other safeguards in place or safety mechanisms or training in place? And we don't know the answer, but we can speculate based on other social norms when it comes to women and their safety and their rights. So that's an excellent point.
And also, to be fair to my male colleagues, once they enter the space and they assume the role of a nurse and they enter the space of the nurse's station, they get abused in a very similar way to us. It's
Mhm,
basically the same sentiment that it's okay to hurt you.
mhm,
I don't want to feel them. I don't want them to feel excluded from
mhm.
that.
No, of
I
course.
Yeah, but I think they to a very significant degree assume the become minimized and marginalized in many ways that we do.
Mhm,
It's okay to attack them.
mhm. And because they are entering a female-dominated industry, and
Right.
if it were that they were entering a male-dominated industry, it may look and feel different.
Absolutely.
So we are seeing across the country a rise up, and we're seeing teachers and service workers and even physicians now, even in our small corner of the world in Northeast Ohio, Doctors Val and Dr. Lauren, we're seeing them organize and rising up. And what do you think is different about this moment in history in 2025? What do you think is provoking more? Our two providers who we love, Dr. Lauren and Dr. Val and you. What do you think is different right now? Why now?
Um, I think I think what's contributing to it is I could say in part generational.
Mhm,
As a Gen Xer, I was raised by, the people who my parents really fit into a lot of the stereotypes of boomers. And a lot of it was just deal with it. And I think we're coming into generations of individuals who don't necessarily see it that way.
mhm,
And that's why maybe a large part of the workforce left. A lot of those people are younger than me. And maybe they thought, I'm not sticking around for this. Like it's not
mhm,
okay to say that's the way things are, or, uh, suck it up or walk it off. I just I don't see that amongst a lot of my younger colleagues. I really admire that. Um, I think that also we're seeing a bigger and bigger rift between people who have things and people who don't. Um, I think that there's a
mhm,
lot of nurses who are able to work now remember a time, or maybe in my age group, remember, in their later 40s, remember a time when there was security, when there was the promise of retiring. And we know that that's not real right now. That's not
mhm,
happening.
mhm.
And we don't have to take it. And so I think people aren't.
So I am a Gen Xer like you, and I am grateful to the traditionalists and the boomers for teaching us to deal with it because it grew a certain grit and
Right.
scrappiness about us. that
Yes.
our way of dealing with it is to deal with it because
Right.
we were taught to, get up, stand up, speak up, fix a problem, work through our responsibilities. And I love that grit. So I think that grit is going to help bridge that gap
Yeah.
between, I think you referenced the haves and the have-nots, what
Mhm.
society has, labeled as the haves and the have-nots. And there are more have-nots than haves right now because, you brought up retirement. I mean, that's super important and it's not attainable for many, but also just in the here and now, affordable housing, healthcare, food costs, transportation, gas. We have a larger and larger gap between working hard, working beyond full time, working 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, doing overtime, and still not having the finances that we need to be able to have a quality life, the American dream. We're promised if we apply ourselves and we work hard that we could afford a happy lifestyle. And that promise is not being granted. So we're doing our
Right.
part, but we're not getting this is a one-way bargain because we're not getting, it's not reciprocated. We're owning our part of the responsibility, but
Yep.
we're not reaping the promise of the benefits.
Yep. So yeah, so I think you're right. Gen Xers have some grit, and then I see a lot of millennials say, "Well, why not?
Mhm.
Why can't I?"
Mhm.
And
That's right.
that's yeah, and I love that. I'm
I
not
do
one of
too.
those people who likes to put down the younger generations because it's really inspiring to see that many people say, "Well, that's silly. Like that's unacceptable." And and not feel and feel entitled to be able to say it. I love that.
I am so grateful to our young people because the young people that are in my personal universe, they have reignited a fire that was in me at a young age that it
Mhm.
was burnt out through just years of oppressive lifestyle of trying to
Mhm.
survive, let alone get ahead. And you kind of become at some point desensitized or hopeless, like this
Yeah.
is how it is until the young people came along and they started to grow into young adulthood and they started to speak truth and light back into my soul and being. And you're right, they're insisting on things that we should all have been insisting
Mhm.
on and
Yeah.
continuing to support each other in. So yes, I'm with you, completely grateful.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
They remind me like, oh, I do have a voice. There's
yes.
the expectation of a voice, and I love that. Yeah.
Yes. And I can go back to something that you said from an even older generation, and you brought up one of your colleagues saying union. We're not coal miners. Well, I actually came from my great grandfather was a in a union, and he was a coal miner in Pennsylvania, and he immigrated here by himself from Slovakia, which is a whole nother story for another day. But
Yeah.
there's examples throughout all generations, and I just love that you are willing to bravely be that bridge between what has come before us and the shoulders of the giants that we stand on, right?
Yeah.
And what we want to carve not only for ourselves, but for our legacy and our future generations. Um,
Yeah. I love that audacity.
yes, a
Audacity,
hundred.
I think, is my favorite word.
I could see that in you. In closing, what would you say to a nurse who may tune in and watch this discussion? What would you say to a nurse right now and who may be feeling the same things that you once felt, or like I just shared, where you kind of get stuck in that repetitive pattern of this is just the way it is and there's not anything I can do, and they feel overworked and undervalued, and they, honest to goodness, feel scared to speak up?
I'd say first, give me a call. I'll buy you coffee.
Great.
For sure. And then the push back. Find a way.
Mhm.
You can push back. You might not know at first, and that's okay. But find other people who are pushing back. It works. It does. It takes time. But and give yourself grace. You're doing hard work. You're doing work other people don't want to do. And there's something really noble in that. So give yourself credit for that too.
All those small wins and all of those steps towards aligning with the power you have within are the right moves, is what I'm hearing.
Mhm. And you're not
Okay.
alone.
So, what can any of our viewers do to support you and your colleagues in your cause and the patients that you care for? What can we do?
You could get what if any of you know any of the members of the Cleveland Heights City Board, if you have a connection with someone in Cleveland who maybe can put pressure on Metro. Um, if you have the chance to show up for an event, look for us. Tell us we're doing good work. We just, just to hear it, thank you is a big, is tremendous. Um, and just be aware, be kind, teach people to be kind. Um, there's there's a lot of power in that. But yeah, if you couldn't, if you have any sway, give me a call. Because yesterday was our first day of organizing, and I would love to leverage some political power against these people who know that nurses are suffering but really don't care.
Well, Patty, I want to extend a huge thank you to
Oh, thank
you, your colleagues, to your allies. I am one of them, and to everyone who is fighting for this cause. I want to thank you for all of it. Your strength, it's matched only by your clarity and your obvious deep compassion. And you remind us all that the fight for a safer workplace is a fight that equals better care, and that
Mhm.
change begins with one person who is willing to stand up and say, enough is enough. So thank you for being here today and having one of what I hope is many conversations moving forward into empowerment, not just for nurses, but for women, and to continue that focus forward. To any of the viewers that are going to watch this recording afterwards, it was an extra meeting, so we don't have an audience today. But to any of the viewers, thank you for watching this episode of the Lady Liberty League. And if you were moved by this conversation and by Patty Kane's efforts, please remember to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and to share this video and to follow us. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great afternoon, a great weekend. Go out and get them and share your voice and your power. And remember, it's one effort of empowerment at a time and gaining your autonomy. Thank you. Have a great day.